Welcome to Trifecta Collective, Finding the Root, where we dive deep into understanding and addressing root causes of chronic health issues so you can help and find healing inside and out, now and forever. Hello, and welcome to Trifecta Collective, Finding the Root. I'm Megan Abbott, owner and founder of the holistic health practice Trifecta Collective. Welcome to the podcast. So today I want to talk about the direct impacts that stress has on hormones, specifically for women. And I want to loop a lot of my story over the last 8 to 12 months into a lot of this because of all of the stress that I dealt with last year. And I shared on a podcast episode quite some time ago now. I think it was late last summer. Some of the things that I was going through as Jonathan, my fiance, was going through his chemo journey and cancer journey and all that kind of stuff. And wanted to give a little, almost like an update, but also tie this into the bigger picture because one, we work mostly with women, and we've worked with over 1,000 women over the years. And we're actually coming up on our 6-year anniversary of this particular practice. And then about a week and a half after that, I'm coming up on 11 years in the industry. Super exciting. And I really don't think most of us truly understand the profound, deep, and long-term impacts that stress has on our bodies. And specifically, like I said, today I really want to talk specifically about hormones. So I also want to clarify something before I dive in. Hormones. So I'm actually talking about 3 categories or 3 groups within the hormone category, and that is stress hormones, cortisol probably being the most familiar for most people. We can think about adrenaline, and there's a handful of other stress hormones in our bodies. Next, I was going to say something else, but I'm going to come back to that. Next, we're talking about thyroid hormones and the way the thyroid can be impacted. And once again, if you want to really deep dive on the thyroid, we did a great, fairly clinically heavy thyroid episode almost 2 years ago. It was one of the early on episodes. So definitely go listen back to that. But I think this is really important, and I'm going to talk about where thyroid hormones are produced, because also there's a misunderstanding there. And then also how hormones are converted and what is actually used, because this also plays a big role in the whole stress process. And this is why you're seeing, if you're in this space quite heavily, especially for perimenopausal women, it's almost becoming default for licensed functional practitioners to prescribe thyroid medication to all women going through perimenopause. I don't love it. I don't love this trend. I don't think from an educational perspective, the long-term risks and long-term impacts of this are really well explained. And then kind of lastly, from the hormone front, we think about sex hormones. And for women, our main 3 that we're going to talk about, I'll say the main 2 are estrogen and progesterone. And then testosterone is also really important for our bodies. Testosterone is not just a man hormone. We have it in our bodies. For everyone across the board, our testosterone starts to decrease as early as about 30, and it can be impacted in other ways. And men can also have low testosterone issues because of stress too. So I think that's important to mention. Once again, today we are focusing mostly on women because that is predominantly who we work with. That is not to discount the impact of stress on testosterone for men, though, because that is also a big deal. So those are kind of the 3 big hormones that we're really going to talk about today, 3 categories, and then within the sex hormones, estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone. And I think this is really going to help you understand more about your body. And for those of you with health anxiety or a lot of frustrations around your hormones, I think this episode is going to provide some very valuable insight into the hormones themselves, the role of stress, and I'm bringing in some other things in here too, once again, from my personal experience. And I am using myself as an example because it's easy to talk about. I'm also very comfortable talking about it and understand I see my story every day. Literally every single day. Almost all women I talk to, this is a very consistent theme. So understand that I'm sharing myself as an example, and these are things that we see in our practice on a daily, often multiple times a day, daily basis. So let's go big picture here first, and then I'm going to get into dive into my story and then start connecting all of this. So big picture, let's understand the role of hormones. Stress hormones specifically are designed to be released and to help us during acute periods of stress. Acute meaning short term. I love to go back in the day. Back in the day, as a woman, let's say we're being chased by a predator. We're being chased by a mountain lion. We want to go real extreme. We can go a tiger or a lion. Let's say a mountain lion's probably a little bit more realistic of something we may have been chased by. A snake, a rattlesnake. I just saw an article about snakes in Arizona, which is why that's coming up for me. So we're looking at all of this, and when that happens, when this acute period of stress happens, what's going to happen within our bodies? We see the threat. Our brain detects this immediate threat. And by the way, I am simplifying this. Our body releases cortisol and adrenaline, potentially some other stress hormones as well. This then helps us survive this threat. We can potentially run faster. Cognition becomes clearer. We become energized. We talk about potential increases in strength. We think like the mother whose baby's under the car, she can lift up the car and pull the baby out. Well, it's these hormones, these stress hormones that are assisting in that. So that is what is supposed to happen in our bodies. Yay. Thank you, body, for helping us survive. What was not meant to happen is for us to be in this drawn out, long-term, constant state of stress. Because that's going to happen. It can stay there for a while, but at some point, your adrenal glands, your brain, these chemicals, these hormones, your body can't produce them at the same levels in these acute situations. Meaning that you've probably heard the term adrenal fatigue. This is what adrenal fatigue is. You were running on stress for so long or long enough. It doesn't have to be super long for reference. Everyone's tolerance is going to be different, and I'm also going to talk about that later. Everyone's tolerance is different, and your body's going to, we can say, quote unquote, run out of these. And essentially what's happening is, let's say with cortisol specifically, your adrenal glands are producing the cortisol. Your adrenal glands require a lot of nutrients. Sodium, potassium, vitamin C, magnesium are big ones. So when you're in this constant state of stress, your body's going to need more of those. These adrenal glands are going to need more of those nutrients. So at some point, it's going to start stealing them from the rest of your body. And at some point, your body may not be able to keep up. I get the question a lot of how much magnesium is too much magnesium at night to sleep. And the reality is it really depends on the person, of course. And for people who have been experiencing very high levels of stress for a very long period of time, it's almost like, can your body even keep up with it? because it's burning through it so, so, so fast. So a lot of times it's like, okay, let's take a certain number of capsules of magnesium glycinate before bed, help with stress, help with rest, help calm your brain down. Magnesium help with your adrenal glands, and then let's also add in a topical because your body, that way we can bypass some of the digestive process for these capsules, and maybe we go straight to a topical, a lotion or a spray. And maybe that's what we need. Epsom salt baths. This is why Epsom salt baths with like high levels. We do high levels of Epsom salt for a lot of our clients. Not right off the bat. We work up to that for reference. And though, I mean, for some people, and I'll tell you personal experience, man, that is one thing I really miss. I love our current lifestyle. I love so much of what we're doing. Man, do I miss a bathtub. And I'll tell you, I've searched high and low for soaking tubs, and within an hour of where we're staying in Arizona, and zero. I cannot wait until we leave here in May. It's looking like I am finding a bathtub somewhere to go soak in. I cannot wait for that. And I think a big piece of that is just the high levels of magnesium felt so good for so long. And that's why I was so drawn to the baths. Plus they're very relaxing to me. I made it a whole vibe, a whole thing. Like all of that super helpful, super beneficial. So that is a thing that happens. And then like your body might run out. And that's where like your body can't produce almost any cortisol unless you have like crazy high stress. And this is for the women who feel tired all the time, except during your HIIT workouts. Your Orange Theory, your burn boot camps, your F45s, like all of these things, you feel so good and you love these super high intensity workouts, and that's the only time you feel really good, it's because you have essentially almost no cortisol and you get just a little burst during this really intense workout. And it feels so good to have those back because your body's so used to running of those, and then they tank again and go back to like a very, very low level where you don't have the energy, you don't have these things, and you don't feel good as a result. And so this is a thing that happens. And this is one of the reasons why, like very, very early on, one of the first things I did once we got the cancer diagnosis, and I understand that Jonathan was not feeling good months prior to his diagnosis, which we're coming up on. We just hit the 1 year mark on his diagnosis. Treatment, we're hitting 1 year on the 31st of March. So, and which is about a week from the recording of this episode. We record a little bit in advance. So, or try to. So one of the first things I added in was I bumped up my magnesium at night, and it went up closer to between about 300 to 420 milligrams of magnesium glycinate. Super, super helpful. By the way, I am still there on a daily basis. Between 3 and 4, depends on the day, depends on how I'm feeling at the end of the day. If I'm feeling a little wired still at the end of my day, say around 7:30 or 8 o'clock, I'm probably going to take 4. Or I might do like two at 7:30 and 2 again at like 9:30 right before I go to bed. I also love some adrenal cocktails, and I don't like making them per se. I don't like a lot of the recipes personally. I rather do a supplement. I rather drink a supplement for reference. I rather not do the capsules. I rather drink a supplement. So Jigsaw Health has a powdered version of adrenal cocktails. It's not the best tasting. I am very used to it at this point, but that is something that I added in once again every single day. As like, yeah, I think that was even before he got his diagnosis, because night sweats were a big thing. And as those started to increase, I wasn't sleeping through the night. And he obviously wasn't sleeping through the night, but then I wasn't sleeping through the night. So I added in adrenal cocktails to help support those nutrients that I knew my body was burning through at a faster rate. So those are two really good things that can be very, very helpful for managing stress hormones. Regulating your nervous system is another really big one that is multi-layered. I do all kinds of stuff from shaking work, energy work, meditation, breath work, brain retraining, brain rewiring, all that kind of stuff. Body work goes a long, long, long long way for me personally. And that is something I'm getting back into is more regular body work because I forgot how helpful that is for me in processing emotions and regulating my nervous system, all that kind of stuff. So that can also be really valuable for a lot of people. So that's probably where I'm going to leave the stress hormones, but understand you don't have an endless supply of those and your body cannot just run on those forever. Okay. So those are stress hormones. Now, I am also going to touch on thyroid hormones kind of here separately as well. So thyroid hormones, this is also something pretty much as soon as he got the diagnosis and we understood chemo was going to be the path forward for him, or we made that decision, I added in thyroid support. Now, understand, I have a history of thyroid issues. I have a history of hypothyroidism and thyroid autoimmunity. And yes, for me, those two things are technically different. There's a strong connection between those two, and they can exist separately and also together. So I added in some thyroid support. Now, once again, this can look really different depending on the person because I've done so much work on my thyroid in the past. There's a product called Metabolic Activator from Cellcore, and that is one of my favorites. That is something I added in early on, and I only recently stopped that. I probably stopped that back in maybe the end of January. So not quite a year, but probably close to 10 months I was on that. And when I ran my labs last year in the middle of his treatment, my thyroid numbers looked pretty darn good. I was very happy with them, especially given the situation. Potentially my TSH could have been a tiny bit lower, and it was still within my functional optimal range that I use. So I was very happy with it. But I think an important thing to understand is there is a very strong connection between our stress hormones and our thyroid hormones. And let's talk about that. So TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone, is actually produced in our brain. The hypothalamus and pituitary glands play a big role in this. They also play a big role in our stress hormones. We have our hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis, or our HPA axis. We also have our HPT, hypothalamus pituitary thyroid axis. So there's already this like overlap between stress hormones and thyroid hormones. So because of that, when stress goes up, typically, oftentimes, our TSH is actually going to be impacted, is going to be one of the first things that is impacted. And that can be high for some people, that can be low for some people. The typical range I am using for most people, with some exceptions, for TSH is 1 to 2.5 for reference. And that is American units. I forget the exact unit measurement of that, but that is in US units. For a lot of international labs, those are the same, but not for all. I have seen differences. So it's produced in the brain though. It is not produced in the thyroid. So I think that's really important to understand. So this is produced in our brain, shares glands with our stress hormones. So you better believe as soon acute stress and or long-term stress, that TSH is being impacted. So we need to understand that when we're looking at our labs. The other two big thyroid hormones that we want to look at is T4, which is produced by the thyroid itself. However, T4 is not actually used by the body. It is not what we call bioavailable form of the hormone, meaning our body has to convert it to something else before it can actually be used, and that is T3. So T3 is the major hormone that our major thyroid hormone our body uses. And that T4 to T3 conversion, about 60% of that is done in our liver. Super important. I'm going to come back to this a few times. 20% is converted in our gut. Also super important. Remember this. I'm coming back to this too. Number three, the additional about 20% is then actually produced from our thyroid gland itself. So, undergoing periods of stress, the likelihood that long-term stress is going to impact your thyroid is extremely high, especially as women. Our thyroids are more sensitive by and large. Our bodies are more sensitive by and large. I'm also coming back to this topic. It is a strength. And sometimes we need to come to terms with that strength. Okay. So I'm going to keep coming back to pieces of the thyroid, but we can already see stress, the brain's impacted, stress hormones, thyroid hormones are being impacted. Okay. Let's talk about what else stress is doing within our body. So, high levels of stress over a longer period of time. And by longer, I mean this can be as early as days or weeks, let alone so many of you. This was also me, months, years, decades of prolonged stress. We can see how this role is going to play a massive role already, and I haven't even started touching on sex hormones. Okay. So, here's another piece we need to understand when it comes to the role of stress and hormones. Once again, let's go back in the day. So back in the day, this mountain lion is chasing us. Let's think about it. So we're starting to produce a lot of stress hormones, potentially our thyroid, like our thyroid's not going to be impacted within moments, maybe momentarily. We're also probably not getting blood work run right at that moment to double check on that. Have you yet to see any studies on like momentary stress and how that impacts the thyroid? But is this a good time? If we're actively being chased, we could die. Is this a good time to, one, pause, engage in sexual activities to try and reproduce? Probably not. One or both of us are probably being eaten in that moment. Number two, are we going to stop and have a snack? And casually have a snack and eat while we're actively being chased? We're going to pause. I'm going to eat some of these berries. As a snack, I need a little bit more fuel. This is a good time to stop and have a snack. No, terrible time. You're going to be eaten, dead. Okay. Therefore, what happens in our bodies is multiple systems stop working optimally. Reproductive health, aka sex hormones, especially in women because we are the carriers of the child in our bodies. Two, digestion. So, when we undergo prolonged periods of stress, you better believe our sex hormones are going to be in a weird place. And this can look really different for a lot of people. I'm going to talk about some really common ones and common things that we very, very, very often see in our practice. And once again, I'm going to loop in myself here. One of the first things that will happen is when stress goes up, cortisol goes up. Usually the first hormone that is impacted is progesterone, and it is going down. By and large, cortisol and progesterone have an inverse relationship, meaning cortisol goes up, progesterone goes down, progesterone goes up, cortisol goes down. Progesterone is a massive support in stress management. So when stress is high, cortisol goes up, and then our progesterone starts to go down. This limits and or inhibits our ability to handle stress. If you are in perimenopause, if you suffer from something like PMDD, your luteal phase, that second, like after ovulation, the week before your period, if you are a nightmare, if you are set off by any little thing, The smallest thing, a hair touching your body wrong, your shirt touching your body wrong, a door closing that makes a noise that just, man, all of a sudden for seemingly no reason at all, it sets you off and you want to rip and throw that door out the window. You have low progesterone. I can tell you 100%. So I can tell you for me, last year, this is one of the first things I noticed was my progesterone started to drop. So this started to look like pretty early on. I would start to notice after I would ovulate, I would still ovulate, and my ovulation was still in a good place. The first, like, my period wasn't too bad, and then right after my period, I felt pretty good. Ovulation felt good, felt the libido increase, mucus changes, cognition, communication, feeling really good. All of those things that so many of us love to feel during ovulation. And then there would start to be, and it started off pretty minor and became pretty major, this drop off, where within a day or two, at the height, it was literally the following day. I all kinds of weird symptoms, seemingly unrelated symptoms would start to pop up. And I'll tell you, it took me a couple months to put some of this together because once again, some of these are pretty obvious. The mood changes, the sleep changes, body temperature changes, heart rate changes. Super common. All of these are super common. What I noticed in my body specifically is I would throw something out, something in my lower back. I would be washing dishes. I say dishes just because that happened twice. I threw my lower back out. And it wasn't like I couldn't move, but it was, take my breath away pain that took several days and a chiropractor visit to fix and feel okay. And then it went away day or two before my period, like all of a sudden totally gone. And at first I was like, oh, cool. Just like it worked itself out. I had been rolling and stretching and, doing all of the things I know how to do, heat, the chiropractor, all of these things. And I was like, oh, cool. It just went away. By the third month this happened, and it was always on day 17, I started to make the connection. Oh, this is a progesterone issue. This is not a my body issue. This is not like doing something weird movement wise. My progesterone is low, inflammation is high, my body has no resiliency to stress, and this is how it's presenting. So those were some of the first signals. Then a few months after that, for me, it felt like I went back into perimenopause. And for reference, I was in perimenopause at 29. It does not have an age limit. Stress can put you there. Supporting your stress and supporting your body can also take you out to a certain extent, depending on what age and where the rest of your body is. Now, if I was 45 when I had started my healing journey, I probably would not have come out of perimenopause. I'm 36 now. I did come back out of it. That is a very high possibility, and at a certain age, and this really does depend on the person. In your 40s, real question mark. In your 30s, much higher possibility to come out. In your 20s, definitely we can get you out kind of situation here. I started getting hot flashes, night sweats. They weren't terrible, but they were absolutely there. The irritability, the increase in histamine issues, increase in congestion, stuffiness, itchy ears, itchy skin. I didn't have any rashes or hives, but I was itchy. I'd have a couple days where I told Jonathan there was a rage monster inside of me. For no reason at all, I would wake up and just red. All I saw was red. Just red all day long. And on those days, I was like, look, like, I'm not going to talk a lot to you. I've got to show up for work. If I've got calls, like, I've got to do this. And I was able to manage myself, manage my emotions, to be able to hold space for clients when I needed to. Outside of that, I did not have that capacity. And so once again, all I was seeing was red. Just all the little things would really get me. And I just red, 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 rage. Irritability coming along with that, sleep issues coming along with that, just not being able to be comfortable, feel just like my body feeling really uncomfortable. All of those things were happening. So the thing that I tried, and once again, I do not recommend this. We almost never, there are a few exceptions here, but we almost never do hormone support without testing hormones because the hormones are not as obvious. We can make some conjectures, and like I had low progesterone, but also did I have low estrogen? What about my testosterone? I don't totally know. I was still feeling okay in the first half of my cycle, so I deemed myself, my estrogen, okay. I was doing a lot to support drainage pathways, and I'm going to come back to that after this piece to help and support my body, and felt like those things were in a pretty good spot. Once again, I've also been in this position before. I'm also willing to deal with side effects because I know I have a lot of tools in my toolbox. So if something goes horribly wrong, I have tools to fix those things. And sure enough, and I have shared this before, I tried pregnenolone as the first offense. And there's a big reason why I tried pregnenolone first. Pregnenolone can help with progesterone levels. It can also help with adrenal support, cortisol support as well, if it's converted appropriately within the body. Mine did not convert appropriately. And so side effects that I experienced were largely mental and emotional. Deep, deep depression, dark, crazy dark thoughts, suicide ideation. I mean, really intensely. Once again, fortunately, I spent a lot of my life in that position. I was able to recognize that it was from the pregnenolone and understand that, hey, this is not me. This is not my body. These are not my thoughts. This is hormone related, and this is a side effect of the pregnenolone. I gave it a handful of days, and I actually did this a handful of days for 2 months to see. And I did get some benefits, but the side effects were outranked the benefits I was seeing because I was not getting the level of benefits that I was hoping for by supporting with the pregnenolone. So after 2 months, I stopped. And I wasn't doing, for reference, I also wasn't doing it for straight 2 months. I would do it for basically every other day starting the day before I ovulated. And once again, like I have kept track. I am always aware of where I am, exactly where I am in my cycle. And I've spent a lot of time and energy learning about my body, learning about my cycle, learning about hormones overall, obviously, but specifically for my body and how this presents and what this really looks like. Which I think for any woman not on birth control, this is one of the most valuable things you can do, especially when you're not in a stress state, but really for when you are in a stress state, because life is going to happen. You're going to be in a stress state at some point in your life, and you're going to see hormone fluctuations. This is also really valuable information to prepare you for the transition into perimenopause, because you're going to be able to start to notice these little shifts. Not that they're bad, not that they're wrong, but having awareness goes a really long way. And one of the things I love doing with women is keeping track of their cycle, keeping track of all changes in mood, energy, cognition, in itchiness and histamine issues, in joint pain, and how your body feels in your workouts, in your relationships, your sex life. How does that change throughout your cycle? All of these things go a really long way because guess what? Hormones are impacting all of these things. And if you want a deeper dive into how our hormones really impact us long term, and this can also give you insight into all of the things that even temporary short-term hormone changes can do, go listen to the perimenopause episode part 3, because I break it down by estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone. Super great episode. Probably like one of my all-time favorite episodes I've ever recorded for the podcast here. Okay, so I did pregnenolone for a couple months. Not a lot of success. And then I went from perimenopause, I came out of perimenopause. The pregnenolone did help me with this. So I started coming out of perimenopause. However, I went into potentially a worse situation, and that was PMDD. And fortunately, I have never had PMDD. I've worked with a lot of women who have, and I would also not wish that on anyone, any other human in the entire world. I would never wish that. It is a total 180 shift for me. And just the depression, the darkness, the irritability, I mean, not even irritability, just inability to handle what felt like anything, anything. Anything that did not go my way. Any of that made a really big difference and was really challenging. Those were very challenging few months. And I remember talking to one of my good friends who's also in this space and who was going through perimenopause herself. And I'm like, man, I feel like I jumped from perimenopause and I was having like the hot flashes and night sweats and all of these things. And now I feel like I'm in PMDD and in this really, really incredibly dark place for 10 to 14 days out of the month, every single month. And, we talked through it and she was like, do you, like, just go on progesterone, support like now to help with this. And I knew that was the right answer. However, I wanted to try a different besides actual progesterone because there's a lot of different forms, there's a lot of different modalities, there's a lot of different ways to use progesterone support. So I decided to go for indirect progesterone support instead of being on right upfront progesterone. And my goal was I was going to give it 2 months. If I was not seeing a difference, cool, sign me up, give me progesterone, get me on that because I cannot deal with this. I also have a history of being on SSRIs, on being all kinds of psych meds, and I know they don't work well for me and my body. Blanket statement. And I've been on just about every single one on the market, or at least that was on the market as of when I was, let's see, man, this was like I got off about 12 years ago now. So at the time, I had been on just about every single one under the sun and multiple ones, oftentimes at any given time. So I chose Tree, or more commonly known as Vitex. This was a game changer for me. And it took me a little bit to figure out the correct dosage for me. And yes, I had every single side effect that you can get from it that I've actually never seen with any clients. None of my clients have ever had any side effects. I got all the side effects. So yay, super fun and very valuable information to know here. So when looking at this, it was really valuable for me to understand that these were the side effects. This is what was going on. And then to be able to play around with timing, to play around with the dosing, to play around with all of that, to figure out what was going to be the best option for me and to be able to support my body appropriately. And I'm at the point now where last month, as of my last cycle, I was on Chastity for about not even 4 consecutive days. I think I took 4 capsules total on my entire cycle. And the only symptom I experienced last month was some cramping at the start of my period. Day 1, I had a little bit of breast tenderness, but I had no breast tenderness leading up. Mood was good. Sleep was good. Like all of that stuff was really good. And I'll tell you, the first thing, I had one night where my sleep wasn't quite as good. I was a little bit restless, and that is when I started the Chastity. And once again, I monitor my own symptoms, and I'm so aware and so in tune with my body and the hormones and what they're supposed to be and what's normal, what's not normal, what all of these things mean, that I was able to adjust it to myself. And now I feel like I'm in a pretty good spot. I do feel like my estrogen's a little low, and I can tell it's getting better. And there's one really important thing I did the month prior that I'm going to come back to that really made a big difference. But I'm going to backtrack a little bit here too. Okay. So progesterone can go a really long way. And by the way, this is the first thing that drops in perimenopause. Like 35, this can start to drop, and you may start to notice the brown blood at the beginning and or end of your cycle. You might notice your period starting to get shorter or your cycle starting to get shorter, your actual period getting shorter. If it was like 5 days before and now it's 3, and maybe you're only really bleeding for 2 of those, and one's like a little spotty day. Maybe you're noticing more sleep issues in the week leading up to your cycle. Maybe so all of these things you're noticing. Mood changes, big one. Once again, progesterone helps with the resiliency to stress. And when that is too low, that can present with a lot of different issues. So that's a really big one. And I'll tell you, if we do, for some of our really sick clients, sometimes women specifically, once again, and specifically with mold, sometimes we will add in castrate earlier on, depending on the severity of their symptoms. And we do spend time tracking their cycles and when we're seeing exacerbated symptoms and what that's really looking like to see if castrate is the appropriate option for them. We also say, hey, look, like this is a band-aid. We feel like this is a necessary band-aid. This is not going to fix you long term. This is not something we want you to be on forever. And at this point in time, we need to give you some normalcy in the week before your period, in the 10 days before your period. Let's take this. And I'll tell you, man, it's helped so much. And like, thank goodness. And once again, thank goodness, no one else. And we're up to, man, we've used this now with, we're probably getting close to 50 clients that we've used this approach with. Once again, it's not a ton because we don't need it for everyone, but it's been highly, highly effective. So if you are experiencing PMDD, if you are experiencing a lot of the symptoms that I am sharing, potentially Vitex or castrate could be a good option for you. Potentially. It is not appropriate for everyone. Side effects. Let me talk about some of these side effects here. So typically, castrate is taken in the morning because it can help with dopamine receptors as well, along with the progesterone. So it's typically taken in the morning. And it should help with energy throughout the day. Except for me, it made me really tired. So I had to bounce between morning and evening for a bit until my body got used to it. It can also bring your mood down, which it did for me. It can, in some people, exacerbate histamine issues. It did for me. Once again, headaches. It can cause some headaches for some people. Once again, it did for me. But none of these are super common. And they can definitely happen. So that can be a big thing. So another big thing that happens when we're stressed is, and this is going to take me to estrogen and testosterone, is so when we have this increase in stress, so we're producing more cortisol, we're producing more of these stress hormones. Well, though for long periods of time, if those are in our body, they shouldn't be in our body. And our body has mechanisms to get these things out. Cue drainage pathways, liver and drainage pathways. So supporting those is really important when we undergo a lot of stress. And this is something we talk about with all of our clients, especially for long term. And this is something, by the way, I started so early on in my own health journey last year as I was undergoing lots of stress. This looked like supplements. For me, I love TEDCA, advanced TEDCA from Cellcore. Other forms of TEDCA are okay. Yes, we have tried all the other ones. There's nothing that matches the one from Cellcore. I added in a binder. Once again, I like Cellcore binders, so those are the binders I added in. And then making sure I was staying on top of liver supporting activities. Castor oil packs, sauna, coffee enemas were my 3 big ones. And then even when I did this on, I would do some anal lymphatic work with that. I would do some rebounding beforehand. All of that stuff goes a long way. Lymphatic drainage, by the way, responds to movement. So you need to move your lymphatic system. Walking is enough. Bouncing up and down can be enough too. So those are really helpful things. So where drainage pathways, specifically the liver, comes into play is 2 roles here. So remember when I said T4 converts to T3, 60% of that is done in the liver? Guess what happens if your liver is too busy trying to process out all of these stress hormones? Well, it doesn't have the capacity to also convert your T4 to T3. Cue thyroid issues, cue weight gain, cue body temperature dysregulation, cue metabolic issues. All of those things can play a really, really, really big role here. So that's one. The other thing that's really important to know about our liver is our estrogen metabolism. And here's a big reason why we prefer, especially if we're going to test hormones. Yeah, we can test blood work, the pros and cons of doing that. We prefer, at least at the beginning, not at the beginning of someone's health journey, but when we start to get into hormones specifically, because hormones are impacted by so many things, stress, obviously, is a big one, which is why I'm talking about it today, is estrogen has multiple metabolic pathways that it can take. And we can have issues with those metabolic pathways. There's also favorable and unfavorable pathways. Especially when we look at estrogen, these pathways are really important and can give us insight into potential health issues like cancer. I do have a cancer expert scheduled, and I'm super excited to interview them. They were a big help in it last year for me in knowledge and support. And I'm really excited to dive into estrogen and cancer and pathways and get into that because she is far more of an expert than I am. But there are unfavorable pathways when we look at estrogen. And if your body's not able to metabolically process out or metabolize estrogen appropriately, this can present as too much estrogen in the body, estrogen dominance. By the way, strictly just lowered progesterone can also present as estrogen dominance. This is why we need to test. This is why when we see women come into our practice on something like a DIM supplement, DIM, I said, who tested your hormones before you got on this product? 9 times out of 10, it's no one. But I had the symptoms. I had breast tenderness. I had all the symptoms. I'm carrying extra weight in my glutes and my thighs, and it's all estrogen related. Maybe, but we need to look at everything all together. You may have just needed some progesterone support. Maybe you've just been under a lot of stress and you just need some progesterone. And that might be the whole thing. Okay, so estrogen metabolism is a really big deal. So if your body's not processing out estrogen very well, and this could strictly be because of stress, well, now your estrogen pathways aren't in a good spot. And you could present as estrogen dominant. You could present with a lot of estrogen related symptoms that it's not really technically an estrogen issue. It's more of a pathway and metabolism, estrogen metabolism type issue. And this is really, really common, by the way. And I'll tell you, for most of our clients that we work with, drainage pathway support is usually where we're starting with most people. And I'll tell you, people with all kinds of hormone issues coming in, whether that's perimenopause, PMDD, PCOS, endometriosis, like any or all of these things or a combination of these things, cycles get more regular right off. And this is largely just because of the drainage pathway support that we're doing. And that plays a really, really big role and is a really big deal. So that alone can be very supportive. And once again, I was very aware of that. And I started that very early on in my journey. And by the way, if you listen to my first real update on this, like I had issues. I stopped sweating and I became heat intolerant. And this was largely because I think because I was absorbing a lot of the chemicals and my body wasn't able to keep up, even though I was supporting it. I needed higher levels of support. And when I did that, I did notice a difference. And that looked like increasing the supplements, increasing all of those lifestyle things to support. And it made a big difference. And once again, I still do a lot of that kind of support. So that can play a big role with estrogen. Here's the other thing that I'll tell you most recently has made a really big difference in my own hormones. And this is also why when we look at order of operations, when it comes to hormone health, once again, specifically for women, we don't typically start with hormones. We start with other things that impact the hormones. Stress, inside, outside stress, really big one. One that a lot of people have a hard time understanding is gut health. Gut health plays a really big role in our hormone health. And if your gut is a mess, your hormones are likely to also be a mess. And so a lot of times, if we are seeing gut issues along with hormone issues, we're going to start with the gut issues. We're not going to start with the hormones. Gut needs to come before hormones because there's so much relationship with this. Yes, it does go the other way too. For example, someone with low estrogen, that can also be a contributor to constipation. People with chronic constipation issues, low estrogen could be playing a role in that. And so that's something that we need to take into account, need to take into consideration. And what else is going on with the gut? Do we have bacteria, yeast, fungal, parasitic overgrowth going on that can also impact our body? We often do not need a stool test to look at that either. I'll tell you, for me, I got food poisoning and some sort of pretty significant bacterial infection last year. And that really set my body off, hormones and otherwise. And I'll tell you, I also got sick with the flu potentially. I don't typically get tested personally. For me, it does not make a big difference, but I got some sort of flu or some sort of other gut issue. I felt more actually stomach, my actual stomach, not my belly gut. When we think about the gut's actually really your large intestine specifically. Although, once again, the entire digestive process plays a big role here. But it felt like I had actual stomach issues. And then I felt like even after that, I had stomach emptying issues, almost like a gastroparesis kind of thing. And that took me some time to recover from. And I feel like now I'm in a much better place with that. And I'll tell you, this is because I did some extra gut work. I don't feel like I have a history of SIBO. I have a history of parasites. I have a history of a lot of these gut issues and very chronic gut issues. And I did some work last year with it, and I felt like it definitely helped. And then after this flu thing that I got earlier this year, my body was back in a bad place. And I was not feeling good. And it took me several weeks to recover. And I felt like once I started like really doing some intentional killing work within that, and that was specific to the stomach and the gut itself, man, did that make a big difference. And then I did a full moon challenge. And what that looks like for me, I actually typically we'll do anywhere between 3, 5, or 7 days, where around the full moon being in the middle, and we do specific parasite work. And the reason why we do this around the full moon, it's not just woo-woo, there is real science to back this up, is when the full moon is out, there is more lightness. And when there is more lightness, our melatonin drops. When our melatonin drops, our serotonin increases. Parasites also have serotonin receptors, which increases parasitic activity around the full moon. Parasites also play a really big role in hormone health. I'll tell you, the vast majority of people we see with PCOS and endometriosis, parasites are playing a big, big, big role. And it's not a specific parasite. It's not like a tapeworm or a ropeworm or a liver fluke. It's the quantity of parasites within their body. It's the parasitic load. They have too many parasites. And this is a result of a variety of things. Stress, chronic stress being a really big, big, big piece of this. So we need to take a look. So I did this full moon challenge, and 2 weeks later, I started my period. Massive difference. This was just within the last 2 months. This has happened. Massive difference. It's not a big surprise to me, and I am surprised at how significant of a difference it made. And once again, I don't even know if this month I'm going to need any progesterone support. I do still have some chastity left, and I suspect I may not even need it, which is great. And not having any of those symptoms, and the only, once again, like cramping was the big thing for me, and that's the only thing I need to go away. And part of that is estrogen, part of that's estrogen metabolism. It was also a very stressful week for me, the week of my period this past month. There's a lot going on emotionally, especially, and so that obviously can also play a role here. So we also need to look at your gut health. And if we're not looking at everything all together, this is the issue that I really see. And this is where many functional medicine practitioners I see get all of this stuff wrong. It's like, oh, you came in with hormone issues. Okay, well, it's like, let's test all the hormones and then just do hormone support. And it's like, we're missing the bigger picture. What about all of the things that also impact hormones? Because I know if I only look at hormones, I'm band-aiding and you're going to have to be on this stuff forever. And the goal is not to be on this stuff forever. The goal is holistic health, is to address the major stressors, the major issues, so that the body has the capacity to heal itself given the right conditions. And the goal is to give it those right conditions. And that looks at looking at the whole body altogether. This is also why we look at nutrition, lifestyle, movement, nervous system, and targeted and limited supplementation when we work with anyone within our practice. So all of that's super important. All of that's super valuable to know. I also think it's really valuable to understand micro stresses and how those can also build up over time. We get a lot of feedback, especially as clients going through active protocols of, oh, my period was a little shorter this month, or oh, my period was a little bit longer. Oh, I had more cramping. Oh, I had this and this. And here's the thing. We know there's going to be micro shifts, some positive, some potentially not as positive, as we do work with clients. And all of the symptoms help us understand what is likely going on with the body so we can say, hey, let's bump up your castor oil pack use, or let's bump up this supplement, or we need to do some extra nervous system work because your nervous system is in overdrive. It's hypersensitive right now. We need some additional support there, and that should help going into your cycle next month. All of that's really valuable. But this is why it can be so valuable to track and keep records and really get to know and understand your body, your hormones, and what differences feel like. It's also really important not to panic and go into a health anxiety spiral. If you are that person, go listen to the episode on health anxiety. Got some great tools and strategies for you. But that's why that work is also so important, so that we can look at these and understand, is this just because you had an extra work deadline and you had some extra stress the second week of your cycle, and so now you're feeling it the week before your period and your mood just isn't as good. Your sleep isn't just as good. Not necessarily that's a normal thing, but that we have reasons and explanations. And it's like, okay, well, is that stressor gone? In which case, okay, well, the body does come back into a state of normalcy. Also understand, and I've seen different information. I've also just working with myself and my own hormones, but also working with, over 1,000 women at this point in their hormone health. Sometimes it can take up to 3 months for something to impact our hormones. Sometimes a few days will make a big difference. And I think it's important to keep that in mind as well. And that our bodies are more sensitive. Our hormones are always fluctuating from a day-to-day and hour-to-hour basis. Now, our testosterone, kind of to bring this full circle, starts to drop right around 30 and slowly starts to go down. It's what happens in all of us, by the way, men and women. So when we look at testosterone levels, we can see that drop, especially if we're not doing things that naturally support our testosterone levels, like getting natural light in our eyes. That's a really big one. Strength training, it's a really big one. Feeding and fueling your body with whole nutrient dense foods, really, really big one. All of these little things go a really long way when it comes to our testosterone levels, specifically sleep quality. If you're not getting enough sleep, if you're not getting good sleep quality, that'll all impact your testosterone levels, among many other things in addition to that. So we may notice lower sex drive, lower motivation, lower cognitive function can also be, all of those things can be correlated directly with testosterone and or indirectly with testosterone levels. And not only just testosterone, but all of these other hormones can also impact most of those things as well. So stress is a really big deal. And I really think this rise in crazy perimenopausal symptoms, the reason perimenopause is such a hot topic right now is because as women, especially, like for my age, a little bit younger, and definitely 10 to 15 years older at this point, most of us have been chronically stressed. For some of us, our entire lives. For some of us, a good portion of our lives. And our bodies are designed to handle stress, and at some point, they're not going to be able to. The more trauma you have, the longer your nervous system's been chronically dysregulated, the more work that you're going to have to do to optimize your hormones, because we need to look at all of these things. Here's the last thing I wanted to mention. I will tell you consistently, especially with the women that I have worked with directly, and by that I mean I typically work with the most chronically ill of all of our clients. And directly, I work with all of our clients indirectly or directly, depending on the situation and the case and the day and the week. So one of the biggest pieces of feedback that I often get, and once again, I noticed this too when I mentioned this at the beginning, women who have gone through the healing process and really, really done a deep dive in all aspects of their lives become more sensitive. And this comes with awareness, just more awareness within the body, which can result in increased health anxiety. And you are often going to be more attuned to minor shifts and changes, a little bit of bloating, cognitive function's not quite as good that day, mood's a little off, sleep's a little off, any or all of those things, hormones a little bit off. And that can bring on onset panic. Can also be challenging to acknowledge and accept that your body is really sensitive. It is a strength if you allow it to be. And yes, it can also be a frickin' pain in the butt as well. I want to use harsher words, and I don't swear a whole lot just in my normal day-to-day life. And I really don't do that a whole lot on this podcast, especially. And man, that doesn't even barely scratch the surface sometimes. And look, I feel that way sometimes too. I still feel that way sometimes too. And I try and remember that it is a strength. It's part of being a woman, is part of being in touch with my hormones and my body and my emotions. And I am someone who feels very, very deeply and still does not love that aspect of myself. And I know that is a massive strength. And I then logically tell myself that. And sometimes it does not feel that way. And that can impact my hormones within days. So, all important things to keep in mind. This doesn't mean your hormones need to be a living nightmare, because they shouldn't. At any age, whether you are a young teenager, whether you are going through perimenopause, whether you are postmenopausal, our hormones aren't meant to be a nightmare. And stress is one of the biggest things, big picture stress is one of the biggest things that I think that is missed in supporting hormone health. And one of the most beneficial things we can do for our entire body, and in particular, our hormone health. So hopefully this was helpful for you, give you a little education, understanding some different resources and some different things to think about. Thank you for listening. As always, please like, subscribe, follow. If it resonates, a 5-star review really, really, really means the world to us. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next week.